Alright, today we're going to be going over command line arguments in Python. In the last video, we went over recursion, which is the process of defining a function that calls itself over and over again. We also went over the base case and recursive case, which are two important parts of a recursive algorithm. So now we will be going over command line arguments in Python. Before actually explaining what a command line argument is, the one important thing I want to note is that we're going to actually be using the shell in this case. So here on Replit, we see we have two tabs, right, next to our IDE. We have two tabs here, which are console and shell. So basically, when you typed out our code and hit the green run button we have up here, it's going to basically output that to the console. But the shell, on the other hand, so let me explain what a shell is. A shell is basically a computer program that presents a command line interface. So basically, a command line interface is a text-based user interface that processes commands from the user in the forms of lines of text. To make it more clear, in a shell, we have to actually type in our own commands to run a program, rather than instead of hitting this green run button and automatically outputting what we had here in the console. So the first thing I want to demonstrate for this example is through a print statement. So we did this in the first video, so this is already familiar, so let me just type it out. Print hello world. So what we usually did here is we hit this green run button, and it's going to output to this console what we had over here. Now, if I switch to the shell tab and hit this green run button, then it's going to switch back to the console and run what we had here. So that's the thing of that's what important aspect of a shell. In the case, we need to actually run commands in order to run this program. So the way we do this is first we specify the language we're using, so Python, and then give a space. And then after giving the space, we have to give the name of the file. So the name of the file is main.py. And after typing in the name of the file, I just need to hit enter. We see our output here is hello world. And that's what we have over here. So that's basically how we run our Python programs in the shell. We first have Python. And keep note, we need to make sure we have it all in lowercase. And then give a space, and then the name of the file. So main.py is the name of the file or program that we want to run. Now, if I type Python main.py and Python with the uppercase, then we're actually going to get an error. It's going to give us an error. Bash Python command not found. So we need to make sure that we're doing the capitalization correctly. And in this case, we're having everything in lowercase. So that's an important thing. If I change this, for example, if I typed in this uppercase and change this file to an uppercase, then I need to do Python main.py with an uppercase. I need to make sure that this capitalization I'm typing here correctly matches the capitalization of the file I have here too. So now if I run this, we see hello world. But if I type out main.py all lowercase, we're going to get an error because here it says no such file. Because we have main.py, which is all in lowercase, but the actual program we want to run is main.py, but the M is capitalized in this case. So capitalization also matters. All right, so that's basically how we run our Python programs in the shell. So now we're going to be going over command line arguments, which is what we've been waiting for. So the first thing we want to make sure about command line arguments is I'm going to actually demonstrate this through argv, something called argv. So the way we're using this is from sys import argv. So we know from import is when we want to import from a specific module, we want to import a specific thing. So from this module, we're importing a specific thing in this case. So in this case, what argv basically is basically a list of command line arguments that the user is passing in when you're passing in this command line arguments in the shell. To make it more clear, let me present an example. So after from sys import argv, and recall, if we have from import, we don't have to do sys to argv, just go straight to using argv. And let me go on to printing out argv. Now what this should print out is a list. So to make it more clear, let me rerun this. And a good tip is if you want to access something we typed in recently in the shell, we just need to hit the up arrow on our keyboard. Now if we keep hitting up on our keyboard, we see it's going to go more into the past of what we typed in the shell. To toggle between what we typed in the past, we use the up and down arrow on our keyboard. So if we hit the up arrow, it's going to go to the recent command I typed in. Up arrow goes a little bit more in the past what I typed in. If I want to, however, go up to more recently, then I hit the down arrow. So that's a good tip. You can actually hit the up and down arrow instead of retyping what I need to keep typing. So in this case, I need to keep typing Python main.py. I could just hit the up arrow if I want to rerun a command I typed in earlier. So now if I rerun Python main.py in the shell, we see it's getting an error because I forgot to switch this file back to main lowercase. So let me resort it back to main.py all lowercase. And now let me rerun it. So up arrow on our keyboard. And now if I run it, we see it's going to print out a list. The list here only has one data item, main.py. So the thing about command line arguments is main.py is actually the first command line argument we're passing in this case. So basically the name of the file is going to be the first command line argument when we're running our Python program. So Python, give a space, and then the name of the file. So the name of the file is the first command line argument in this case, and that's why this argv has main.py as the first command line argument. So everything after Python is basically command line arguments. You can think of it that way. So Python, let me run the command, but with an extra argument. So I'm going to say Python main.py. Let me type an additional thing. Let me just type Python, and here we see we have a list with two data items. We first have main.py, which is the first command line argument we're passing in, the name of the file, and then the second argument we're actually passing in is Python, which is another data item. So basically command line arguments are separated by spaces. Main.py is one argument and therefore one data item in this list called argv, and then we have the second argument after the space. We have Python, which is another command line argument, hence the second data item in this list. Now if I wanted to add a third data item, then let's say for example Python main.py, give a space Python, and give a space again programming. Now we should see that we have three data items here. So main.py, what we see here up, main.py is the first command line argument. Python is our second command line argument, so second data item. Now the third command line argument passed in is programming. So main.py 1, Python 2, programming 3. So third command line argument, which means the third data item in this list. And we see here that we have programming as a third data item. So the way we index into a list works similar here. So if I wanted to print out just programming, then what I need to do here is recall that indexing into a list starts at 0. So I have to count my way up here. So 0, so main.py is 0, Python 1, programming 2. So at index 2, I should say argv square brackets 2 if I want to print out programming. And now let me hit the up arrow on my keyboard. And hopefully we should see the output here be programming. So let me run this. And we see here that we're gonna I print argv. Let me rerun it. There seems to be an error. Let me retype it. So Python main.py programming. Alright, so we see the output here to be programming. And the reason for that is, well, we have this main.py is the first data item, but that also equates to indexing 0. Python as a second data item, which is basically index 1. And programming as our third data item, which means index 2. And that's where argv2 comes in this case. So that's basically how argv works. It's basically a list of command line arguments that we as the user are passing in. Now if I go back to the console and if I run this, now we should see that we have main.py. So it kind of works the same way. We have this main.py, but in order to actually have a second data item, we need to manually do that in our program. So we do argv. Recall how do we add to a list? We do the name of the list dot append. If I want to add a data item, so I'm just going to say Python in that case. Now if I run this, we see it's going to have the main.py Python. So there we have two data items, and it kind of works similar to shell, except for console we have to actually type in manually in our program to run it. But to make it quicker, we can actually go to the shell and run these commands to make it faster. So Python main.py Python programming, we need to we could just type it out in the shell, and it'll automatically print out the list for us. So that's kind of a difference. For console, if you wanted to print out something like this, we would need to go manually in our program, do something like argv.append, and you can see it's going to get pretty repetitive fast. We want to keep adding more data items. We need to do argv.append, for example, programming, and that thing is going to take a while. So to make it a little bit faster, we could just use the shell in that case. If I wanted to do main.py power programming, what I need to simply do is retype out. So what I had first is main.py power programming. So power, given this first, name the file as the first command argument, and then give a space power, give a space programming. And to recall that command line arguments are separated by spaces, now if I rerun it, we should see we have this list, main.py power programming. So that's basically how command line arguments work. So in the next video, we're going to be going over the modulo operator.